legends, I hope you're all fantastic. It's time for another installment of Friday Q&A. As always, if you have questions you would like me to answer on next week's Q&A video, please put them in the comments below. Ask me anything you like, whether it's guitar gear, questions about what I do with my hair, my monobrow, or food and coffee. I would love to answer anything you would like to ask me. If you're in Perth and you're watching this video, you still got a few hours to get down to Ragdoll's show at Milk Bar at the Civic Hotel tonight, playing with a few other great Perth bands. It is going to be a whole lot of fun making some noise. And as always, if you want to support the channel, there are links in the video description to the music I make with Ragdoll and my Patreon. All right, let's get into this week's questions. This is my Hamer Standard, by the way. It's in drop C. I don't know if I'm going to play this guitar tonight. I might, because, you know, who doesn't love a lightning bolt shaped guitar that can go like this? First question, do I like the band The Tea Party? And the person who asked this question kind of noted that, you know, you noticed some similarities to Ragdoll. That is no mistake, because I love The Tea Party. Amazing band. I've seen Jeff live a bunch of times solo acoustic because he lives in and around Perth. Phenomenal. Just one of those people where, you know, they walk on stage and they do their thing and you're like, ah, of course. That's why you're a rock star, because you can do this stuff. But yeah, I stumbled across their stuff maybe like 10, 15 years ago. I think they were kind of big in Canada and Australia and not really as popular anywhere else. But their first two albums I love. I love the album Seven Circles, you know, the song Writing on the Wall with that. Which is basically like, you know, variation 12 out of the 100 variations of like Ragdoll songs around fret 3, 5 in drop C. I think they're in drop D though, so that's a really cool song. But yeah, I kind of got into them because I really love Led Zeppelin, and I love all the stuff Zeppelin did with acoustic guitars and I guess like, you know, non-traditional instruments, a lot of the folky stuff, a lot of the other non-European instruments they brought in, and that was very much the Tea Party's forte. And yeah, just like a great songwriter. The band's really good. I'm gonna go and listen to some Tea Party for the rest of the afternoon, because it's been a while since I've spun some of their stuff. Great suggestion. That's my suggestion of the week. If you haven't gone and listened to the band The Tea Party, go and do it. If you like classic rock, it's basically Led Zeppelin meets The Doors with some drop D and some dadgad stuff thrown in there. Really, really fun band. Alrighty, a bunch of questions about the FM9. There was a question about like the benchmark performance. I actually don't know off the top of my head. I'm sure Cliff or Matt or someone has posted about that on the forum, which would be the best place to get it directly from the horse's mouth. And does it sound the same as the Axe FX3? Is there any compromise? It's the same sound, you just have fewer instances of some blocks, and it doesn't have the IR capture or the tone match feature in there. And they're things that I use occasionally on the Axe FX3. I would never use those in a live setting anyway. Maybe I'd use a tone match IR, but if someone's made a tone match on the Axe FX, you can import that as a user cab on the FM9 or the FM3, which is pretty cool, I think. And there was another one about the FM9. Do you reckon it's worth going for an FM9 or a whole set of the Boss 200 series pedals, or to something like an FM9? I would throw like a Helix or a Quad Cortex into the discussion here as well. I think they do a lot more. They're far more flexible than just like a set of pedals, which are often going to have, you know, a few presets. I think the Boss 200 series pedals, you know, if you just want a couple of really, really good delays, get a DD200. It's so easy to use. There's knobs on there. It's very kind of tactile pedal. So it will be a very different experience. And my camera battery just died halfway through that sentence. Apologies, back on track. My main point would be that the workflows are going to be different. I think what you give up in versatility, you might get in instant gratification with a pedal board where you just have a what you see is what you get kind of layout. But I think if you're looking for like ultimate flexibility and consistency, you don't have to get a separate power supply with something like an FM9. You can just drop it on the floor. You don't need to mount it to a pedal board. You also have a much better chance of eliminating all external possible sources of noise and things like that. It's just a real joy to use something like that live once it is all set up and ready to go. But you know, different strokes for different blokes. It all kind of comes down to what you want to achieve and how you want to go about it. You could also consider something like the Boss GT1000 Core, which is going to do most of what the 200 series pedals do. And it's all in one box. It's a really, really cool unit. I really want to get my hands on one. A few people on my Discord server have them and seem to be glowing about them. So yeah, we're very much spoiled for choice with these things at the moment, aren't we? Will I do a feature on CC DeVille and CC DeVille's guitar tone? Is that something more than 5 people in the world would want to hear? I think CC is, you know, he had a reputation of being like the worst guitarist of the 80s. If you read any of those guitar magazines back in the day, kind of cruel. Pretty good guitar player. Like, I listen to Poison songs and I'm like, this guy's got it going on. He can play the guitar. Poison were just a band that, you know, I heard and I was like, well, this is kind of bubblegum metal. And they're not my favorite band from the 80s, but, you know, they got a few fun songs. I was always more into the bands that I guess were maybe a little bit kind of harder edged or darker or less commercial sounding, which is a weird thing to say for an era which was very, very commercial. But yeah, I mean, if someone wants me to do that, I will try to find a place to do it. Maybe I could do a whole feature on, like, you know, how to get specific sounds from an entire era. I don't know if I'd want to do a whole video on CC DeVille just because, like I said, I never listened to Poison that much. Whereas I could do John Sykes or Red Beach or something like that because I listen to those players so much. Anyway, let me know if any of you think that's a good idea. A question about some rack gear. What's the big difference between something like a TC G-Force and the G Major? My understanding is the G-Force was sort of like the pro option, although a lot of people really, really like the G Major as well. They both sound really good. The G-Force gives you some different routing options, and there's the whole like modifier system in there, which if you've ever used any modern modeler or multi-effect is going to look really familiar. But yeah, TC are kind of responsible for modifiers, and the G-Force does it really, really well on there. Maybe more instances of particular effects. Don't quote me on that one. But, you know, if you can get a G-Force for around the price of a G Major, then probably get the G-Force. But I also know a lot of people who swear by the G Major and they love it. So yeah, they're pretty good units. I used the G Major for years back in the day with a JMP1 and a BBE sonic maximizer into the effects return of an amp, and I always had an okay guitar tone back then. So yeah. Rack case. You can probably see, well, there's a rack case right here. There's one over there, like a shock mounted rack case. It's a Titan AV road case. I actually bought that secondhand from somebody, so I didn't have it made specifically or anything like that. It just says Titan AV on the side. So yeah, you can probably look that one up and figure out what it is. This guitar feels so good to play. Suggestions for a digital device, like a modeler, I'm guessing, or digital effects, for somebody who hates digital. That's a challenge because I think for a lot of people, they've made up their mind with certain pieces of gear and like certain tone generating sources. So I will ask this question: why are you considering making that shift? Is it like a pure convenience thing? Is it a thing where you're curious about the gear and you feel like you're missing out? Let me know about that in the comments and I can hopefully come up with some decent suggestions. But my main suggestion would be get stuff that has knobs on it. And you know, if you're looking at something like, I don't know, the Fractal stuff, the AX8 is still a great option there because you've got those like gain, middle, bass, treble controls on the actual unit. That was one of my favorite features on that particular unit. So if you don't like menu diving, which I'm guessing you don't with digital gear, get something that has a lot of tactile controls. And I always think of synthesizer companies with this kind of stuff, and I think a lot of them get their user interfaces right, where they make a nice balance between, say, menu diving and then having things mapped to physical knobs and encoders. So yeah, start your journey there and look for stuff that has physical knobs on it. And then I think the modern generation of modelers, I've said it a few times in this video, you know, they sound so good if you know how to use them. Like, digital does not sound worse. I can appreciate that it's a workflow thing for some people, and you might just not like the workflow, in which case, that's fine. You know, you can go and use some of the other things out there that give you a different workflow and live happily ever after pulling great guitar sounds. So there's my advice there. Is that advice, or is that just the ramblings of, you know, a person sitting around a basement full of toys? Who knows? You can all let me know in the comments. Alrighty, let's move on. Valhalla Supermassive. Great plugin. If you don't have this plugin, Valhalla actually released it for free. It's amazing. Beautiful ambient reverb. Are there any pedals out there that can do a similar thing? Off the top of my head, you can probably do some of the things on that with the Eventide Black Hole, Strymon Big Sky, the GFI Specular Tempest would be another one that does some great big reverbs on there. There's the Empress reverb, there's the knnMWCsPrS, however you say that, the Source Audio stuff. There's probably a lot of options out there. I would probably go for like an H9 with the black hole algorithm or the standalone black hole pedal, because I know that Supermassive kind of has a, you know, black hole emulation in there. So that might be a good place to start. Go and listen to some clips. I've got some demos. I've got some demos of all the other pedals that I've mentioned as well. And yeah, I mean, it's so nice that Supermassive is free, so it almost is going to feel like a big thing where you're like, you mean I got to spend a couple of $100 to have this in hardware? But yeah, such a good plugin. Lots of comments on the videos I've done with the Marshall TSL over the week, and I think a lot of people just assume I have some vendetta against that amp. I think it might be just my particular amp just doesn't sound very good. Maybe it's just not a good example of that amp, or maybe it's one of those things where if you do a video about a piece of gear and you state your subjective opinion about it, and if somebody else has a different subjective opinion and they watch it, and a lot of people watch YouTube videos because they just want that feeling of having somebody agree with them, that it makes you a little bit angry, and then you write a like comment that maybe you wouldn't stand by in any other situations. So yeah, I don't have anything personal against the TSL for all the people who think I'm some kind of, you know, DSL master race supporter or something like that with the Marshalls. The TSL that I have, to me, just doesn't do what I want it to do. So that's why I made that video, and why I stand by everything that I said in that video, because it's my opinion and it's my YouTube channel. That's generally why you want to watch somebody's YouTube channel, to kind of hear their opinion and hear their take on things. So yeah, sorry all you TSL owners out there who love your TSL. Just because I don't like it doesn't mean that yours sounds bad, and doesn't mean that your experience is not valid, as with any piece of gear on there. All right, we got time for maybe one or two questions today. How did I convince my wife to have all these guitars in here? And that's a good question. She knew what she was getting into, I think, when we got together, and I actually had a lot of these instruments already. So my guitar buying has probably decreased in terms of how often I buy a new guitar. And it's kind of one of the reasons I started a YouTube channel, because this is an insane amount of stuff to have. These are a lot of toys, and I started thinking, hey, I should make individual videos with all of these kind of things. So yeah, the YouTube thing definitely drives the gear addiction, especially when people say, hey, can you do a demo with this thing that I want to hear? Or can you do a demo with this other thing that I want to hear? It leads to a lot of gear accumulation. Maybe that's what I have, gear accumulation syndrome. Not just acquisition, it's accumulation, because you get it, and then you keep onto it because you tell yourself, well, I could use this on a recording, or maybe I could do a comparison video down the line. But that's not the question anyway. And, you know, like anything, if you're trying to convince your significant other that you should have a thing, it's always a negotiation. And it should always be a two-way negotiation, and having that openness in your relationship is obviously very important. But, you know, if it's a case between, you know, you spending, let's say, a ridiculous amount of money that maybe you don't have to spend on a guitar, and having a good relationship with another human being, you should always value the relationship with a human being. I think out of everything I've learnt playing music over the years, ultimately, it's not about the toys you have, it's not about the music you're playing, it's about the relationship you have with the other humans you're making music with, because music is is a relationship between different human beings, and that's the beautiful thing about it. So yeah, I'm very fortunate that my wife totally supports what I do, and I do my best to repay that and totally support her in any endeavors she wants to do or any things she wants to buy. So yeah, I'm very, very fortunate, like I said, to have all these kind of things, but you know, they're just things. That relationship that we have together is far more important than any of these things. And I often tell myself, it's like, you know what? You're just lucky to be healthy, happy, and, you know, for me, I live in a place, I was just lucky to be born in a place where, you know, the standard of living is relatively high. And, you know, I can be a guy with long hair who expresses myself, and she can be a woman who goes out into public and kind of does whatever she wants and lives her life. And at the moment, unfortunately, there's a bunch of places in the world that don't allow you to do that for various reasons. And without delving into a whole rant about that and making this, you know, an op-ed, I'm just lucky. And I think we should always have some time in our day to just acknowledge that and, you know, have those little moments of gratitude. So yeah, I try to do that every day, and I'm certainly very grateful for everybody who takes the time to watch these videos and ask questions and participate in this community. We're getting deep here, very, very deep. I have one last question for the day. Thanks for bearing with me, everybody. Who do I think is the most criminally underrated band? This is a question from my buddy knnMWCsPrS Rex. He mentioned Evergrey, and Evergrey are a fantastic band. I love Evergrey, and I have to say, I think their best album might be Monday Morning Apocalypse, when they did that almost kind of like mainstream rock radio album. So many good songs on there. Great album. I love Tom England's voice, and oh man, he's got one of those kind of gut punch voices. He just packs so much emotion into his voice and his playing, and you know, they're heavy and they're melodic and they're dark, but they're uplifting and kind of everything I like about heavy music. But you know, you've watched enough of my videos by now. You know the most underrated band in the world is King's X, and King's X always deserve more love. So I'll play you all out with a little bit of King's X. Can I remember how to play Black Flag? This might be funny if I don't. Anyway, if you've got questions for next week, put them in the comment section below. If you want to support the channel, links in the video description. Hope you all have a fantastic weekend. Stay safe, be good to one another. I love you all. I'll see you next week.